Welcome into the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Glad to have you all here with us, joining us for episode 105 of the pod. Today, we are talking all the upcoming Star Wars projects, the ones that are definitely coming out, the ones that we're not so sure are coming out, ones that are they even still a thing? All of that and more in today's episode. But before we get into our discussion of upcoming Star Wars projects, including a brief discussion of the Skeleton Crew that comes out in less than 2 weeks' time. Want to give you a quick reminder that if you're not yet subscribed on YouTube, check us out there for the video version of the podcast. Shout out to the 460 of you who are currently subscribed over there. Want to give also a brief teaser for we're going to play around with the idea of potentially releasing an extra video that's a clip from the podcast on Saturdays. So be on the lookout for that if you're a uh, video watcher of the podcast. Going to be releasing kind of a short condensed clip each week of the podcast every weekend. So stay tuned for that. And once again, if you're an audio listener, check us out over on the video version on YouTube if you're interested in seeing those. Additionally, you can contact us via email at hothhangout@gmail.com with your Star Wars thoughts, questions, or otherwise, and we'd love to showcase them on the pod. You can also find the Hoth Hangout podcast wherever you get your pods, including both Apple and Spotify. And if you're listening on either of those platforms or any platform that allows you to leave a 5-star review, leave a 5-star review on the podcast. We'd appreciate it very much. And it also allows other people who love Star Wars to easily discover the podcast as well. We're on the socials at Hoth Hangout on Instagram, TikTok, and X. Check us out on each of those platforms, as well as the link to our Hoth Hangout community Discord server, which you can find down in the show notes of today's episode as well. If you caught last week's episode, my one-page fan fiction of Luke and Vader joining each other is available in the Hoth Hangout Discord server.
And not many
But
people know about it or seen it, and people in the Discord have.
yeah, exactly. So check it out. Link is available down in the show notes. Of course, we're talking about upcoming future Star Wars projects today, and including ones that maybe might not happen, but nonetheless, our question of the week that we're posing and teasing here at the top of the podcast is: which Star Wars project are you most excited for? It can be one that's definitely confirmed, one that's not yet potentially confirmed, but just up in the air, speculation. Let us know in the comments of the video version of the podcast or over on the socials. Joey, how's it going, man? Are you excited to talk all things upcoming Star Wars today?
This is a very Star Warsy type of episode because all of the things that we're going to be talking about, all the projects, some of them we know for sure are going to happen. A lot of them we have no idea if they're going to, if it come to fruition. We're actually going to see what was meant to be. So this feels like just like home, unfortunately, as a Star Wars fan. Like here are the things that we can be excited about, but who knows by the end of the year, which is actually coming very soon. I didn't even realize it after I said that. Coming up in a couple months here. Not even. It's like less than 60 days away.
It's like 40 days
It's like
away.
40 days away. Yeah. Um, if we're even going to see any signs of hope for some of these projects.
Yeah, I mean, we'll touch on a few today that we have like a firm confirmation of an actual release date. But 80 to 90% of the um, films and shows we'll be discussing today are just that speculation. And so that's kind of the fun part about being a Star Wars fan, honestly. Like you said, today's a very Star Warsy episode in that we're going to be doing a lot of speculating around like, is this coming out? Is it not coming out? What have we heard? What is the consensus about this film? And maybe the feelings around the potential release of a lot of these projects that, again, we don't have a lot of detailed information on. But before we get into our specific information about the various Star Wars projects we're going to be covering today, this actually ties in really well because we got a lot of info just today about another upcoming Star Wars project, a new installment, season 3 of Star Wars Visions. Joey, I know you know that this is like one of my favorite shows that they've chosen to do in recent years. In fact, I feel like I'm on the record saying this is arguably the most underrated Star Wars anything out there. Like it's really easy to be a Star Wars fan and not ever have seen any of Star Wars Visions Volume 1 or Volume 2. And I guess for those people who are unfamiliar with what it is separate studios. I think even from different countries in seasons 1 and 2. Although it's my understanding that Volume 3 will all be Japanese-based studios, and all of these separate studios were basically given uh, more or less free license to say, all right, give us your take, your rendition of what Star Wars is, kind of with that uh, anime, lens to it, more or less. And so there are some really fantastic stories that came about as a course of volume 1 and 2 of this show. Volume 1, I believe, first debuted in 2021, and then volume 2 coming out. I think it was as recently as last year. I want to say, yeah, because we did an episode where we ranked the new episodes, a podcast episode, I should say. And so, volume 3 is confirmed to be coming out next year. It's probably likely that this drops like on May the 4th. I
I
wouldn't be
wouldn't be
shocked.
surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, that feels just kinda like a perfect time, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that's when Volume 1 came out too, back in 2021. But again, I'm really pumped for this show. Right before we started recording, I was reading up on some of the studios, that are responsible for each of the episodes, in the new volume, and again, if anyone is unfamiliar, every episode is usually, like, 15 to 22 minutes, and they're not related to the other episodes. And everything in this is, of course, not canon. And so, again, this goes back to something I feel strongly about. The more freedom and flexibility you give showrunners and creators with the content they're working with, I feel like more often than not, the better project you get, or at least the more originality you get. And so, there are some really great studios. The one I will shout out because it's a show I love. Um, Again, all of these are Japanese studios. Wit Studio is getting one of the episodes, and this is the same studio that made one of my favorite anime, Vinland Saga. If you're a fan of history and Vikings, highly recommend that show. By the way, um, but I'm so pumped about Visions Volume 3. Sorry to go on a soapbox there
No,
about
it's all right.
how excited I am about this show. What do you
I'm
think?
I'm more of a Bears fan, not a Vikings fan.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I had
don't
to,
I don't
I
know if
had
that's good this year.
it is not good. Let me tell you, my blood pressure is probably skyrocketing at this point
It's
this in the season.
it's good at home. It's just not good on the road. Am I right?
I don't know. It just feels like it doesn't matter where it is. It just last couple weeks have just been so difficult. Anyway, that's another podcast that we need to start up. I'm excited for this too. I think we even mentioned it, maybe even as recently as last week when we did our what if episode, because this is exactly what can come out of it when, like you said, if the filmmakers or whoever is making the studios that are making this content don't have to line up exactly with canon. You just come up with these really cool stories. So just like your fan fiction last week, just like something like Rebuild the Galaxy, Visions kind of is in that same arena. And I think it's really cool to see what you can make of this Star Wars adjacent universe where you just kind of have freedom to do whatever you want. So I'm excited for this. I know we definitely had a good time watching Visions season 2 together, and May the 4th, I would assume as much. I think because there isn't really anything else after Skeleton Crew, if I'm not mistaken, just Star Wars in general. So I think we even
Just
mentioned
Andor.
maybe. Oh yeah, Andor. That's true. Yeah, yeah. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But other than that, those two, not really a ton of Star Wars coming up. So will there be, now that we know that there's Visions, will there be another Tales of the series of some sort? Tales of the Yub-Nubs, maybe, of the Ewoks. I don't know. Who knows? But I'm excited to see this.
Me too. Yeah, and also worth noting. Last point on Visions Volume 3 here. A lot of these studios are also the same studios that made episodes in Volume 1, and they're being like recontracted to make episodes in Volume 3. And so this might be the first part of Visions where we get sequels to
Oh,
um like Volume 1 episodes. Like, if you'll remember the very first one, the duel, where like the Sith has that like umbrella lightsaber, and then there's like the big reveal that the good guy is actually like a Sith, a dark side Force user too. The Ninth Jedi episode, where like, there's all these Jedi, and then they're actually Sith looking for lightsabers. The studios that made both of those episodes are coming back. So there's a lot of people
Mm.
speculating that like we're gonna get like sequel episodes to some of
Oh,
the
that'd be
Volume One.
sweet.
Yeah, I would love that. But again, lots of speculation that this is going to come out on May the 4th in 2025. Hoping that's the case, but regardless, I'm just stoked to be getting more Visions. So if you haven't seen Visions, give it a chance. It's on Disney Plus. There's I think 10 episodes in each volume. In total, they're each like 20 minutes or less. You could knock all of them out in like, I mean, it depends on how much Disney Plus you're wanting to watch in one day. But if you wanted to watch all 20
Yeah,
episodes in one day, you could do
you could
it.
do it. Yep.
So, check it out and hope you're excited for Visions Volume 3. We asked everyone in last week's episode of the podcast, in our Luke, if he turned to the dark side episode, would you like to see Luke join Vader? Everyone who voted on YouTube actually said yes, getting 100% of the votes there. And then over on X, more of a split vote. Again, X being the pessimists here. No.
They're like,
50%,
leave my Luke alone.
yeah, 50% saying yes, 50% saying no. So it's a toss-up, I guess, but seems like most of the folks on YouTube thinking they would like to see Luke join the dark side as a fun what if episode. The folks on X split in that decision. And that about does it for our news and polls today. Stay tuned into the YouTube community tab as well as the Hoth Hangout X account this week to vote in our polls this week and have your vote cast and be heard in next week's episode of the podcast, episode 106. Let's talk some Star Wars upcoming projects. This is something that I feel like if you just Google this every week for the past like heck, like 7 or 8 years, there's probably like a new article that's been written. Uh, you know, daily even I would say. I mean, there's so much constant speculation about stuff that's been coming out. Some of it is confirmed, most of it is not. I guess I'll briefly mention before we get into a lot of the speculative stuff. Skeleton Crew, of course, is coming out in less than, I guess it's exactly 2 weeks time from today, on the day of this recording. It's coming out on December 4th. Really, really stoked for Skeleton Crew. Next week's episode of the podcast, by the way, is going to be covering like everything Skeleton Crew as we lead into the show the following week. And then, of course, Andor Season 2, which we also got the announcement of the release date for that last week. That has officially been slated for April 22nd of 2025. And then Ahsoka Season 2, of course, being in the works, not having begun production yet, but it is widely assumed that that will be getting a second season, unless just something wild happens in the next year, which let's hope that's not the case. But, of course, no date for Ahsoka Season 2 being speculated for summer 2026. So kind of off the bat, wanted to get some of the bigger, live action shows out of the way and use that to transition into talking a little bit more about some of the upcoming films, especially that Star Wars has had in the pipeline, some much longer than others. We want to also shout out Culture Crave. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, they have this handy graphic we're going to be using for some of our discussion just about the various Star Wars projects that have been announced. And it kind of gives a really brief, concise breakdown of each of these. And more or less, we're going to be going kind of in order on this list, talking about each of these as we go. So, I mean, we're going to start things off with Mandalorian and Grogu. Of course, this is the one film on this list that we do have a release date for. So when we said like 80 to 90% of the stuff doesn't, here was the 10% that does. This is, of course, slated to come out May 26th of 2026. So still some time away, over a year and a half. But also worth mentioning here with this one, Joey, I mean, I don't think I've heard that a season 4 isn't happening, but it's made it seem a little bit more, I guess, unlikely that we get a season 4 of Mandalorian and Grogu. I mean, I guess that depends largely on how this film ends. Is this going to tie into the Dave Filoni New Republic film, which we'll talk about here in a bit? Are they going to use that to tie loose ends? Are they going to use a Four Seasons Mando to tie loose ends? Again, lots of speculation here. The most recent piece of news we got on Mando and Grogu actually is that Sigourney Weaver is going to be joining the cast. This, I believe, came out as news at the end of August, and courtesy of Deadline.com. And so, I mean, that's a fun piece of news. I'm a big Sigourney Weaver fan. Love me some classic Alien. Shout out to
Hmm.
those series of films. Really, really fun movie, especially the classic. It's the original. It's a classic. How are you feeling just in general about Mandalorian and Grogu, especially because it's of the fact that like this is the one thing we can solidly sink our teeth into and say, okay, I know when this is coming out.
What I found interesting about this one is, you remember in it was last year, right? Celebration Europe, when they announced all those movies that were going to be they were going to be creating over the next few years. This was
Hmm.
not one of them. this
Right.
was this one kind of just came out of nowhere, and this was the one that ended up having a release date first and being completed first. So for them to have not had mentioned it at Celebration Europe, I'm curious about that. I'm just being the Star Wars fan that I am, you've learned to there's going to be some skepticism every step of the way, right? So I'm curious of why they wouldn't have mentioned it if by the end of, I mean, it's still 2026, but they have it done, they have it filmed, to have it, why didn't they mention that one? For so there's that. But to what you were saying about if there's going to be season 4, I can't imagine you having a series and then having a movie come out and then continue on with the series afterwards, right? It doesn't seem like that's the right way to go about things in a particular series. So I would I would think that this would be the end of the Mandalorian. And I'm trying to remember if they mentioned it as much as that this will be kind of the end of the Mandalorian story. And but yeah, now knowing that there's going to be another Dave Filoni movie afterwards. When I say afterwards, I mean it's going to be released afterwards. We don't know exactly when in time and space it's happening in the Star Wars universe. But to see this kind of come out of nowhere, I think I'm excited for it. This should be fun. Whenever I see Grogu, I just think fun. Maybe I don't know if that's the right way, but I always think, oh, it's Grogu. It's going to be a little
Yeah.
lighthearted. It's going to be more fun. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, especially with season 3 of The Mandalorian. Just not a ton of Din Djarin and Grogu in there. So maybe that's why they demanded their own movie. Maybe Din and Grogu got a little upset. They got Boba Fetted a little bit in their own show. So maybe they just wanted a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think The Mandalorian at its core, part of its issue is that it really was never intended to be as big as it became. And so like because it is like the original TV show, at least, Disney Plus, not including like all the retro Ewoks and droids stuff, of course, and because this is the original like live action TV show, I think, I mean, making this into a film just feels like Disney reverting back away from their show model and leaning more into like honestly kind of what Star Wars used to be, and not just used to be as in like 10 years ago, like used to be as in like with the originals. Like I can't imagine how much merchandising money that this movie is going to make. I think like Mando and especially Grogu, like merchandising stuff. I mean, I don't even venture to estimate what that is, but can you imagine just like how many kids, if not already, are going to be wanting like their very own Grogu?
Right.
And so I don't. There's something about like turning a character like Grogu into a film that somehow feels like it generates more of that than a TV show does.
Mm-hmm.
There's just more like, I don't know, largeness, excitement
Mm-hmm.
to it. But yeah, I don't know. It would feel a little bit odd to not end it, I think, in a show and rather like have the story end in the film only because like imagine, 20 years down the line, you're someone and you watch the 3 seasons, you're like, all right, let's see how the story ends. What's the fourth season like? And meanwhile, dad's like, well, there isn't a fourth season. It ends in a movie, which is fine, but it's just, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I feel like I'm being a little bit pessimistic and nitpicky with how they're gonna do things, but I actually hope we do get a fourth season of the show as much as I didn't love season 3. I feel like you can tell more complete stories in TV shows, as cool as it is to experience like the cinematic event of a full feature length film. That is granted the show is like not just 8 episodes, I will say. Like give me 12 episode seasons again. But anyways, you got any more thoughts on Mando and Grogu? Because from here on out, it gets a lot more speculative.
No, we can move on.
Okay. Well, again, we've categorized each of these things into definitely happening, currently alive. Does it exist anymore? And then there's some ones at the end that we'll list briefly that just aren't happening anymore. This was the only one in the definitely happening category. So if that gives you any information, we're now moving into some of the currently alive projects, meaning that they are going to happen, but it's not 100%, because anything could change. This one is getting probably the majority of the news recently. This is the new Jedi Order film starring Daisy Ridley, which was originally announced at Star Wars Celebration 2023. Of course, this is taking place after the conclusion of Rise of Skywalker Episode 9, and Rey is now attempting to rebuild the Jedi Order. This one is slated to be directed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, uh, and the most recent announcement with this film is that Stephen Knight left as a screenwriter. We covered that piece of news, I think, 2 weeks ago on the podcast. The original release date for this film was actually December 18th of 2026. So about 6 months after when Mandalorian and Grogu was coming out. It has since then been pushed back. Actually, recently, this information came out that Disney officially replaced the release date of this film with Ice Age 6 instead. So instead of getting potentially, Star Wars Episode 10, Disney is now filling that slate with a new Ice Age film. Which, by the way, have you seen? How many Ice Age movies have you seen?
I did not know there were five. I'll be honest. I thought there were two at most.
I think I was. I think
Maybe three.
yeah, I was gonna say maybe I've seen three. I don't even couldn't even tell you the plot of any of them besides the first one. But don't fret, Ice Age fans. You're getting your sixth film instead of Star Wars Episode 10 on December 18th, 2026. But so no official release date for this film. Actually, regressing in terms of its information. Originally was supposed to have that holiday 2026 release time. The other thing to consider here is it's a little unclear if this film is part of the rumored trilogy directed by Simon Kinberg, which has been in a lot of the news cycle, the Star Wars news cycle recently. So Simon Kinberg recently announced that he is directing a trilogy. However, of course, this will star Rey reportedly. And again, it's unclear if he's directing all of them, if he's writing and maybe Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy is directing the film with Rey, or if this is an entirely separate Rey trilogy and Rey is still doing the one movie with Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy. Not a lot of answers here. Hopefully, we get a little bit more clarity in the next, I guess, year or so as to what actually is going to be going on. I don't know, Joey. I want to leave this one up to you because I know you're a big fan of the character of Rey, and I saw a little bit of criticism online that Star Wars is like leaning really heavily on her as a character. What would you like say in regards to people who would criticize news like this?
Well, at the end of the Rise of Skywalker, obviously it's Rey. Rey's head honcho. She's the one she would be the one to lead the Jedi Order. I will give a shout out to our boy Finn. He's around doing stuff too. He could, I don't know if John Boyega is keen on the idea of returning to a Star Wars just because they did his particular character pretty dirty. I think we've mentioned this before in the past. But so we know that Rey Skywalker, as a lot of people do not like, her being called, but we know that she is definitely the character to continue on with Star Wars. And to be honest, I still enjoy her as an actress. So I think we've got a good shot here. But we mentioned this last week. If you mark it as episode 10, 11, 12, You're gonna have a lot more eyes, a lot more criticism on things. And if you don't shy away from it, that's fine. But you got to deliver. You just have to deliver. We saw what happened with the sequel trilogy, the cluster that ended up becoming, with the directors and the writing, the storyline, everything just seemed so so out of just didn't make any sense. So now we haven't even started. I don't know if they haven't started filming or writing or whatever it is. We don't even know what's happening here. If there's going to be one movie, if there's going to be a trilogy, if there's going to be both. Um, so if it is both, I mean, it is very true then that they're really leaning into her character, which I love. But at the same time, the business side of it, the things that are going on now, uh, gives me some pause. I'll be honest. I'm a little worried to see how this is going to turn out, because of all of the people leaving the project. Now we have this trilogy coming in. There's just no transparency, that we have no idea exactly what we need to expect from her character and from all the movies that are coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the point you bring up with like the 10, 11, 12 thing being like good for marketing. I think that's honestly like a big question that Disney execs probably consider pretty heavily in their boardrooms. Like, I mean, a lot of the criticism of 7, 8, and 9 is because it was branded as part of the Skywalker saga. Like this is like part of the first 6 films. I think if you don't brand them as that, I think you automatically get the crowd of people who were critical of those films thinking, well, like I didn't like it, but I don't have to like group it with a thing that I really care about. Um, the flip side of that is like, well, obviously the marketing. Like if you do group them, it makes I don't know how much more money, but it's a financially smarter move to say we're coming out with episodes 10, 11, and 12 than we're coming out with a new trilogy and just like having it be its own thing. So it's kind of like that money versus, I guess, like, are people gonna like this? Because I mean, let's be honest, there's always gonna be like probably 10 to 20% of Star Wars fans who like pretty much no matter what happens in these 3 films, they're not going to like them.
The actually guys.
Yeah, which is kind of sad to say because like I always want to go into any Star Wars
Yep.
project thinking like I hope this is amazing. But the sad thing is like there's always going to be 10% of fans at least who like go into um a sequel trilogy related film thinking this is gonna like I'm gonna hate this no matter what. Um, so it's like what side do you cater towards? Do you try
Right.
to make as much money as you can, which is all honestly what's probably going to happen, or do you cater towards all right, you know what? Let's break off from the episode number thing and let's just make this the Rey Skywalker trilogy. Of course,
Please.
you have people more happy that way, but you make less money that way. So,
Hmm.
anyways, that's kind of how I see the balance of things in regards to that. But so, I mean, that's got a lot of the news recently. But moving on to our next film, again, this is another one in that currently alive category, and this is actually one that I'm really excited for. I wish we had more news on this one. It's another one that was announced at Star Wars Celebration almost a year and a half ago, in 2023. This is the Dawn of the Jedi film, slated to be directed by James Mangold, who I believe his most recent film was the newest Indiana Jones movie. Which did you see that by the way?
Um. y-
Dial of Destiny.
yes. Oh, with Yes, I did. With
It was
Phoebe.
Waller, Phoebe Waller. What's her? She has a hyphenated last name,
Yes,
right?
yes. Mm-hmm.
Anyways, yeah. So it was an okay film. I wouldn't say it was my favorite Indiana Jones movie. It was a side note.
Waller
Sorry,
Bridge. Waller
Waller
Bridge.
Bridge. That was it. Yeah. Um. So James Mangold, who most recently directed Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, is slated to direct this movie. It takes place in a new time period, and when we say new, we actually mean old, 100,000 years roughly before the Skywalker saga takes place, or hundreds of thousands of years before, I should say. Really, it's getting to like the origins of the Force. Like, how did the Jedi learn to discover this? I think Mangold was even quoted as saying something like, "This is, if you've ever seen like the original Ten Commandments movie. I think it's Charlton Heston who made that,
Mm-hmm.
like back in the his 60s. I'm gonna throw that number out there. Hopefully, someone in the comments corrects me if that's the wrong decade. But um, like he said, what I really wanted to do, can we make like a 10 Commandments of the Force? Is is his
I
quote.
like that.
Yeah, like the origin story of the Force. So I'm really excited and looking forward to this. I think the number of years actually is supposed to be rumored at 25,000 years before the
Hmm.
Skywalker saga. So anyways, this is one I'm always keen to explore prequel era time periods. I find that era to be one of the most interesting times, and I'm pumped for this. I hope we get more updates on it. Have you heard anything else in regards to Dawn of the Jedi?
I mean, yeah, just hear what we said. I mean, 25,000 years before. Um, it'll be fun learning about the Jedi, like even way, 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 way back then. You know, when you hear the Dawn of the Jedi, that's like the beginning, right? That's something that to start off, this entire thing. I'm yeah. So just to see the origin of these things, I think it's always going to be a cool thing to see because obviously hopefully we'll see some some Sith, maybe some Mandalorian. I mean, aren't they supposed to be around during that time period too? So to see this and also to see it not only in canon but also on as a movie, I think that'd be really cool. I think something like this probably would have been good on a TV series as well
Yeah.
because of I hate to put it this way, but I mean, if the acolyte could have done something, that's what I'm thinking of because that's you had a lot more Jedi. This is but I think this could have done well as a series as well. But I'll take a movie. I'll take a movie. Just what you mentioned earlier, they're kind of swinging back to the models of movies and such, which is interesting because I don't know. I just don't watch movies as much. I don't know if it's me just being in my old grumpy age where I don't want to be around movie theaters and people anymore. Um, but I just feel like, whenever I talk to people, they're just not going to the movies like they used to, like pre-pandemic. So for Disney to make this move, kind of swinging back over to movies, a little bit of a shocker to me.
I feel like the amount that I fluctuate between preferring movies or shows depends on like how busy I am in life.
Hmm.
I feel like the phase of life I'm in right now, I feel very busy, and so I can't commit to shows right now, and so I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I'll just watch like a movie because like I can commit to 90 minutes, but I can't commit to you know 12 episodes of their 45-minute shows or whatever it is.
Right,
But
right,
I definitely used to be more of like what you're saying, like I'm looking for something to watch. Let me find a show.
right.
You know, I'm also like one of the weirdos that pays for the monthly subscription to their local movie theater and goes to
Hey, you're supporting that theater. I can't complain too
yeah,
much
yeah,
about that.
yeah. Next up we have the Lando film, and I say that kind of in that tone to indicate that this was originally supposed to be a TV show. This was announced all the way back in December of 2020 as a TV series that was slated to be um, uh, Donald Glover portraying the role of Lando, as we saw him in the Solo movie. And then, of course, about a year and a half after the original announcement, Kathleen Kennedy came out and said, "There's no movement on the show. They're waiting for Donald Glover to complete his projects." This was originally supposed to be written by Justin Simeon, and he was going to serve as the show's showrunner. However, he reportedly exited the project about a year after that in July of 2023. This would be about a year and a half ago, um, due to Haunted Mansion, which he was working on. Uh, but later on said he was still attached, I think. Now, that's a
Yeah.
direct quote, which is
Hmm.
kind of a weird thing to say. I'm still attached, I think. Like, are you or are you not?
Right.
But that was what he was quoted as saying. And so Donald and Stephen Glover then were noted to be taking over the writing and the showrunner responsibilities. It was only less than 2 months after that, in September of 2023, when it was announced that this was shifting from a TV show to a film. Again, kind of in that same theme we talked about with Disney seeing some of the shortcomings of the TV show model that maybe were so successful during the pandemic, kind of starting to teeter off now and saying, well, let's shift back to movies. Um, and then basically a year to the day later, um, Donald Glover was quoted in an interview saying he wanted to have more fun and less serious Star Wars movies. This was just about 2 months ago when he shared that quote. So it's all the information we really have on Lando and Joey. I would guess that you're pretty excited for this one, having it be your favorite Star Wars character here.
I mean, absolutely. And also Donald Glover, one of my favorite actors too. I loved him in Community. I didn't watch all of Atlanta, but I did enjoy him in Atlanta for the
Atlanta's great. Yeah,
season or two that I did watch of it. He's just really good. He's a good actor, great performer. As Childish Gambino for a while. I think he's retired for that name for now. Just so yeah, I'm super excited to see what comes of this. I don't think there's been any no news on what this is about. So what
right.
exactly this? I mean, obviously it would be in the earlier Lando days. This being, but I would not be surprised if a Billy D version of Lando, kind of pops up. Later, maybe later on in the movie. I don't know. Who knows? Billy D is getting a little bit older, so hopefully they. I don't want to say anything else other than that, but
Yeah,
I
find
think
some wood. Find some wood. Knock on it.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So I'm excited for this project. I just want some more news. I want dates. I want to at least hear them. Having finished the writing, and the whole thing, like you mentioned with Justin Simeon, very, very odd. When I was looking into, the news that surrounded this series or this movie now, it seems like he is still has some responsibility in this movie. So maybe there was part of a script he had written or something like that. So who knows? Who knows what'll come up? What Justin's responsibilities and footprint will be on this movie. But either way, love Donald Glover. I'm excited to see what when it finally does happen. Hopefully.
Yeah, and like you said, not a whole lot of plot information here, but hopefully we get it soon. Whenever this film comes out, maybe 2027 potentially. I'm just spitballing. Hopefully we get it earlier than that. But again, this is in the currently alive category still, and we're moving into our last film in the currently alive category. This is the Dave Filoni Star Wars movie, which we've referenced already in some of our talk about the Ray trilogy and the Mandalorian and Grogu, like connecting into that time period. Um, this was also announced at Star Wars Celebration 2023. As we mentioned, it's set in that New Republic era during the same timeline as The Mandalorian and is also slated to close out the stories started in The Mandalorian. Now, is this going to close out like all of the New Republic timeline stories, or is it just the Mandalorian one? Still not exactly sure. No details in regards to that. I hope it's like the epic finale conclusion of all the New Republic stuff. But if that's the case, like then you'd have to wait until like Ahsoka is done. I mean, like, does this movie even come out till like 2032?
You're right, no
I
doubt.
don't know. Um, but the main quote from Filoni about this film is that he wants it to deal with the moments between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. And so I think he's really kind of trying to bridge a gap with this movie more than have it be like a canvas for some of the TV shows. I think he's trying to, again, like connect the thread rather than just like paint a picture. I don't know
Yeah.
if that analogy rings true with anybody, but what do you think about Dave Filoni's film?
Sure, Thread wasn't that isn't it the Force? That's also called the Force now, I
Yeah,
think.
I
Yeah.
did that. I'm gonna
I see
pretend I
that.
did that on
Yeah,
purpose.
you
Yeah.
definitely did. No, I think the I don't know what I'm excited for it. It's Dave. Dave is, great in tying these stories together. He is he's George Lucas 2.0, maybe 3.0 at this point. I'm not even sure. So I want to see how his mind thinks in movie form. That's what I'm more excited for, because of all the things that he's done in the animated space and now in some of the TV space, to have it all come into a movie, and this is a big one too. If he's truly trying to like wrap it all up with a nice bow, with a nice bow. I don't know. Like, it seems like a big thing to do for. I don't know if this is the first time he's directed a movie. I feel like it, other than, you know, with a huge budget, just kind of just go ham on it. I'll be interested in seeing what he comes up with here, because this is no short order. This is a huge thing. Out of everything that has we've mentioned here, this one is a big one, because if you're truly trying to end this republic, this new republic era or whatever it is, and also says things like bridge that gap between these episodes, that's just a lot, and this is a space that he created, though, the Mandalorian series and
Mhm.
everything like that. Him and John Favreau, this is their baby. So, you know, I hope in day one they already thought of that day in 2032 or whatever. So hopefully it all makes sense at the end of it.
Yeah, definitely. The last point on this one too is the rumor is that this is supposed to be titled "Heir to the Empire," which,
Oh,
if you're a fan of the formerly expanded universe now known as Legends, this was a novel written by Timothy Zahn, widely considered to be one of, if not the best Star Wars author. So it's about Thrawn,
Thrawn.
and I'm assuming a lot of the film will be too. Love me some Thrawn. All right, now we're moving into the does it even exist anymore category. These are films that have been mentioned, like even at times like this is coming out, and now it's like we either haven't heard about this or it's fallen off the radar. The first one is the Taika Waititi Star Wars movie. He is probably most recently known for the two most recent Thor films, are two of his bigger movies on his recent filmography. I really liked Thor Ragnarok.
Ragnarok was great.
Yeah, I didn't love Thor. What was it? War and Thunder, Love and Thunder.
Love and Thunder.
Yeah, I thought three was better than four, but I like him a lot as a director. I like kind of his comedic tone. I don't know how that will fit with Star Wars, but it was originally announced on Star Wars Day 2020, that this film was in the works, and then really like radio silence for the next better part of 3 years. There was an update in March of 2023 that the film was still in development, as reported by Variety magazine, and then, um, according to the Film and Television Industry Alliance production tracking service, the movie officially started filming in January of 2023. Now, I don't know if this was like we started and then we stopped, because I haven't heard. I mean, we're almost 2 years from that date now.
Hmm.
Still no updates. Couldn't tell you if there's any cast in this, who's associated with it other than Taika Waititi.
Hmm.
Um, the only other news is that Christy Wilson Cairns is a co-writer, and potentially starring in the film too. And so,
I think she might have actually left as a writer as well.
see, like she's not even part of it anymore.
I think originally she was, and then she exited at some point as well. Just like a
Yeah,
lot of other writers do with Star Wars projects. What is the deal?
that's what I mean. Like Disney just announces more and more and more of these movies and shows, and like 75% of them don't get made. It's like, why are we jumping the gun here? Like, let's wait until we start filming. Let's wait until we have someone solidly on board. You know, because all these films we're about to mention are just like not even probably going to happen. Sad to say, but the Taika Waititi movie, I don't, as far as I know, Joey, I don't think there's any plot information about what
Nope.
this is, just that he's directing. Another film that falls in this category is the Shawn Levy directed Star Wars movie. And this is the director, if any of you listening have seen Deadpool and Wolverine, this is who created that film. Original reports were that he was connected to a new film that he would start after completing Deadpool and Wolverine, as well as the fifth season of Stranger Things. That report came out in November of 2022, and then actually was quoted on a podcast known as the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, saying he's not interested in creating a redundant film, nor one where he has to serve another. I actually love this quote.
Yeah,
Based,
me
I mean
too.
that it's like I'm not gonna make something that you know want me to fit into a box. Is basically the way I interpret that. It's like I'm gonna make what I want to make. Which, if you've seen Deadpool and Wolverine, that's about right.
Yes.
Again, no plot knowledge or anything like that with this film. He was also quoted at one point saying he had an idea for the film, but I think the actors' strike, which we saw back about a year and a half ago, really uh, put a halt to this one, and it's still like not super clear if this is moving forward or not. So, any other news or knowledge in regards to the Shawn Levy Star Wars movie, Joey?
No, that's all I found too. I mean, that Happy Sad Confused podcast that he was on, I think it was earlier this year.
Okay.
So somewhat recent as far as, so I don't know if, yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. I would more put this in, will this happen? So I think it does exist, at least in his mind. But as far as, will this happen, who knows at this point? It's kind of in that Star Wars limbo that shows and movies and even video games get into within Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've got two more films here in this same category. Does it even exist anymore? This next one is probably the most puzzling to me because I cannot figure out what Disney is doing with this movie. Rogue Squadron, which this one has been, originally announced for quite a while. It was announced during a Disney Investors broadcast in December of 2020, and it was like, we are releasing this Christmas of 2022. Joey putting a note in our podcast notes that like looks at watch as we note that we're now 2 years past that. This was slated to be directed by Patty Jenkins, coming off the success of Wonder Woman. Actually, I never saw Wonder Woman 2, by the way. Did you ever see that?
Um, I think I
What
did. I couldn't tell you what
Wonder
happened.
Woman like 1984 or
Oh, yes.
there was a year in there. I don't remember what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah. I think I did watch that one.
Yeah, I think she directed that one too, as far as I'm aware. But um, so this Rogue Squadron is also a callback to a video game and a novel, and it was supposed to be more or less like an adaptation of that novel and video game. Later the next year, in November of 2021, the Hollywood Reporter reported that the movie was taken off Lucasfilm's production schedule because of Jenkins' prior commitment to Wonder Woman 3, which I think was canceled. I
Pretty
don't
sure that's what
think
it was too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Wonder Woman 3 ended up getting greenlit, ironically. And so then another year and a half goes by, and Variety reports that the film is not even in development any longer. In March of 2023 was when that report came out. Um, Ironically, in response to that report, Patty Jenkins 5 days later said that she had signed a new contract to write and direct the film.
That was a year later.
Or
That
excuse
was a
me,
year
yeah, a
later.
year later. Yeah, a year and 5 days later.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've heard anything else. And so it was like, okay, this
Mhm.
movie's dead. It's not happening. Patty Jenkins comes back and says, "Wait, we are doing this. Like, don't
Mhm.
hold on. Like, still no plot details. We can assume obviously it's going to be related to the novel and the video game, but this is another one that people were pretty excited for. I remember when we talked about
Mhm.
this. Gosh, it was over a year ago. And you were pretty pumped about this one, no?
Yeah, I mean anything with I'm thinking like Top Gun meets Star Wars. That's what I'm thinking, and that sounds great to me. A little Maverick and Goose in Star Wars. I'd love to see that. I didn't read the book or play the video game, so I don't have any context in what it's involved in. But if anything is going to be more Star Warsy, it's the something that was dead that's coming back. So if Rogue Squadron can pull that off, if they can be the Darth Maul of movies, that would be great. I wouldn't hate it.
Back from the dead. Does that imply that Rogue Squadron was sliced in half at one point?
It sounds like it. I mean, they said it was no longer in development in 2023, so I mean,
Yeah.
so it seemed like it, but yeah, Patty Jenkins breathed some new life into it earlier this year.
Yeah. Well, our last film for today is actually three films. It's a trilogy that was of everything we've talked about today and every Star Wars project speculated to come out. This is the one that has been speculated the longest. We are almost, we are over 7 years since this was originally announced. The Ryan Johnson trilogy of films, which was announced all the way back during the release period of The Last Jedi. This has been like in the works for a long time. Um, Originally, Rian Johnson said that his first film would be released once he finished filming Knives Out, which came out in November of 2019. Ironically, he has since made a sequel to Knives
Mhm.
Out called Glass Onion. Both of them are really fantastic movies. If you haven't
Mhm.
seen either of them, highly recommend. So we're well past that timeline. At one point, it was even speculated that he was collaborating with David Benioff and DB Weiss, who, if you're a fan of the Game of Thrones show, which is an amazing TV show, I might add, minus the last season. Um,
I love the caveat that everyone says that.
yeah.
It's
Have
like
you seen
Lost.
Game of
It's like
Thrones?
Lost too. No, yeah,
Yeah,
I watched Game of Thrones.
yeah, yeah.
We had a watch party for the finale, and I'm like, cool, cool. I'm glad we got pizza at least and some alcohol.
The highlight of the finale of Game of Thrones was, well, at least we got pizza and alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, kind of a bummer of a season, but credit to those guys who worked with George R. Martin to create, the first 5 seasons or whatever it was. But they're not even a part of this project anymore. Not even clear if Rian Johnson is a part of this project anymore. So, um, Rian Johnson trilogy. I actually like Rian Johnson's storytelling style, so
Me
this is
too.
something I
Me
would
too.
like a lot.
Hmm.
Um, at this point, I don't feel like it's going to happen, but ironically, this was announced 7 years ago. No update, no confirmation, or no decline that is or
Right.
isn't happening. Another kind of up in the air one. So I mean, that's kind of, we've covered a wide range of spectrum of things that are definitely happening as soon as 2 weeks from now with Rogue Squadron, to stuff that was announced 7 years ago, and we have literally no other knowledge, like the
Hmm.
Rian Johnson trilogy. There's even a few other things we can briefly mention that are projects which are confirmed to be not happening. The Kevin Feige movie, the Guillermo del Toro movie, David Benioff and DB Weiss trilogy, which was like connected to Rian Johnson. Unclear if that was supposed to be the same trilogy or different trilogy.
Right.
The Acolyte, I mean, in the most recent cancellation of something, Rangers of the New Republic, which was supposed to star Cara Dune, which never happened. It's just like film after film after show of things that Disney
Yep.
has uh, promised or given hope for in some way that is not happening. Again, I don't know what that ratio of things that came
Hmm.
to fruition versus that didn't, but it's got to be like, I don't know, 1 to 10, like we said off the top. It's getting a little bit ridiculous now how many projects Disney has talked about doing that don't actually ever happen. So I don't know. Of everything we've talked about today, Joey, what is the one thing that you really hope Disney like comes through with that
Oh,
you, if you had to pick one project?
I mean, if I had to pick one, it's no surprise it's the Lando series or the Lando movie. I just want to see that. I think especially with Donald Glover and his brother Steven at the helm. He even mentioned himself he wants a little bit of less Star Wars or less serious Star Wars. I think that would be something that I'd really enjoy. I'm tired of like really having to think. Listen, I loved Andor, right? But that is some serious Star Wars, right? I want to be able to kind of zone out and just enjoy the ride. And I have a feeling that this Lando movie would be exactly that.
I like that. Yeah. I, I I'm all for that, like especially with the character of Lando being portrayed by Donald Glover. I think it would go over pretty well. For me, it's hard for me to not pick Dawn of the Jedi. I would either have to pick that or the Dave Filoni movie, both of which at this point, are like pretty likely to be happening. I mean, the Filoni one probably more than the Dawn of the
Yeah.
Jedi one, but um, but I want both of those movies so bad. One, because I love that era. Two, because I love Dave Filoni. Shout out to Dave Filoni. So, but that kind of brings us into the question of the week this week is, which Star Wars project are you most excited for? If you're watching the video version, let us know down in the comments below. If you're listening to the audio version, let us know on the Hoth Hangout socials. Of everything we talked about today, what are you most excited for, or anything we left out? I mean, there's speculation that Obi-Wan Kenobi season 2, Book of Boba Fett season 2, these are things that I mean, especially Book of Boba was looking like it's not going to happen, but just in general, what are you most excited for? What Star Wars project are you most looking forward to? Let us know, and we'll talk about the results in next week's episode of the podcast. Which I should mention, next week's episode, again, in anticipation of the release of Skeleton Crew on December 4th. Next week's episode will be entirely dedicated to Skeleton Crew in preparation in advance for the release of that show. Really excited to do another final episode covering all of our thoughts and feelings leading into the release of the TV series. And then the following week after that, likely going to be doing an episode on the synopsis of episode 1, kind of our general thoughts and breakdown. And again, if you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, we're going to be doing breakdowns or live reactions, I should say, to the episodes there. So check us out, and hope to see you guys on episode 106 talking about Skeleton Crew. And as a reminder, if you're not yet subscribed on YouTube, once again, check us out there. Hit that subscribe button and tune in to all of our latest podcast episodes, our reactions to the upcoming Skeleton Crew show and other shows as well. And our newly thing we're trying out here, we might be posting some more clips on the weekends, on Saturdays, some 8 to 10 to 12-minute videos, clips from the podcast. So check us out on YouTube. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, you can email us at hothhangout@gmail.com with those, and we'd love to showcase them here on the podcast. You can also find the Hoth Hangout podcast wherever you get your pods, including both Apple and Spotify. And if you're listening on either of those platforms or any platform that allows you to leave a 5-star review, leave a 5-star review on the pod. We'd appreciate it very much, and it also allows it to be more easily discovered by other people that love Star Wars as well. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Hoth Hangout on all the social platforms. Follow us on each of those. And once again, check us out in the Hoth Hangout Community Discord server, which you can find the link in the show notes of today's episode down below. Joey, you got any last thoughts on your favorite potential upcoming Star Wars projects?
I just would love to see all of these things happen, but given the history that we've seen over the past few years, very likely that not every single one of these will be made. But that's kind of what it is to be a Star Wars fan nowadays. I mean, they keep throwing things at us, and for whatever reason, they either do or they don't happen. And sometimes the things that do happen, you kind of raise an eyebrow to, like, how did that get through? So I hope that's not indicative of the things that that they do eventually greenlight, and hopefully they figure things out a little bit here. But of course, with some of the storylines that we have for each of these shows, whether writers are leaving or coming in, or this is a trilogy, is it not? I mean, super confusing, but very much the Star Wars fan experience.
Yeah. Maybe we can just work towards like a 50%,
right.
ratio of the things we announce that we actually get to be made. But one can hope, Star Wars fans can hope. And, I'm looking forward to, like you said, hopefully some of these at least.
Yeah.
But we appreciate y'all for listening to today's episode. Special shout out to Gibbo, who couldn't be with us today, but thank you to producing today's show, video, and assets. Gibbo, who will always be greenlit. And by the way, Gibbo, our second episode in a row under the 60-minute mark, as long as we make sure not to end too long from now. So I'll leave it at that. Shout out to George Lucas. Shout out to Dave Filoni. Shout out to all the upcoming Star Wars shows. I hope we get as many of them as possible as we've talked about today. And looking forward to seeing all that Star Wars has in store for us in the future, including Skeleton Crew coming out in 2 weeks. Super pumped to watch that here with you, Joey. And hope you all can join us for those. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. We'll catch you next week in episode 106, talking about Skeleton Crew before its release. And until then, we'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.